Welcome to the Low Carb MD Podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope. Nothing said on the Low Carb MD Podcast is medical advice. Please consult your own doctor before making any lifestyle changes.
Welcome to the Low Carb MD Podcast. I am super excited today. We have a very special guest, actually the sister of a guest we've already had on. This is the sister of Sam Apple. Her name is Jess Apple, and she's a writer. She's an editor. She managed a not-for-profit magazine focusing on metabolic health, and she is the organizer behind the Metabolic Revolution, which is a rally in Washington, D.C., coming up in October. And I cannot wait to hear more about her story, more about the rally, and more about what inspired her to get into the space of metabolic health. We're talking a bit off the air, Jess, and you started talking about your sort of formative years and what really inspired you to think a little bit more critically about nutrition and health overall. Do you mind sharing a bit of that?
No, I'd love to. First, thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm honored to be here. And I'm happy you mentioned my brother, Sam. I want to plug his book, Ravenous, which
Amazing
is about
book.
Cancer as a metabolic disease. So it's a must read if you're interested in metabolic health. And so, it's not surprising that Sam and I both ended up trying to understand why people get sick, because our mom, she had MS and she got sick when I was 5, Sam was 2, and she never got better. She never had any remission. She had a very slow, steady decline for about 11 years. And she, we didn't understand what was wrong with her. Like, nobody did. It was just explained that her body was attacking itself and there's nothing anyone could do. And so there was this, total sense of hopelessness. And I spent my whole childhood trying to understand what would make a body attack itself. Like, there's got to be a way that you can stop it. And in my mom's lifetime, there wasn't. And I was always health conscious. I always wanted to do the right thing, to stay healthy. So I followed the dietary guidelines. I ate low fat. I ate very high carb, and I was a vegetarian. And it's always been really important for me to not eat animals. I stopped eating meat when I was 10 because I didn't want to harm animals. And it was really a part of, my personality, a part of my moral identity. So I didn't really think too much about diet as long as I was eating low fat until I got really sick when I was 25. I got chicken pox, and I was sick for a few weeks. But when the pox went away, I just kind of didn't really get better. And when I look back in hindsight, like, all of that weakness and the fatigue and all the various symptoms I had, it must have been the beginning of what I would eventually be diagnosed with, which is autoimmune diabetes. So that's another tangent, but basically what happened to me was, I got sick with an autoimmune disease at the same time that my mom did. And I just realized that I needed desperately to figure out what I could do to survive. It was no longer a question of, even like wondering scientifically, like medically, what's going on. It was like this emergency, like I need good information. I've got to figure out how to not have my entire body attack itself until I, end up something like what happened to my mom.
I can't imagine what that, I just can't imagine what that feels like. Um,
It
and
feels
as
like,
a kid, to see your mom go through something like MS, and I can imagine that having a huge impact on you wanting to be healthy and find health, attain health, sparking like sort of curiosity. Um, what were those years like? I'm just curious,
my childhood was pretty sad. We had Sam and I have a great dad who was always doing his best, but it was pretty devastating. I can like my mom stopped talking. She stopped being able to do anything, and I remember as a kid seeing her, like, the phone would ring and I'd see her pick up her hand to try to reach the phone, but her arm shook so badly she couldn't actually get it to the phone. And, these situations where you're like, am I supposed to help her with the phone? Like, or is that taking away like her job to answer the phone? But she really couldn't do anything. And I mean, she just deteriorated until she could breathe, and that was it. And so
I'm so sorry.
yeah, I just, it was sad. It was just always really sad. And
I can imagine that lighting, I mean, clearly between the work you've done and the work your brother has done, that lit a passion somewhere to figure
oh,
things out.
yeah, absolutely. Because like it's just, I mean, I guess, there's more understanding of MS maybe now, and maybe treatments that help, but at the time there really wasn't anything. And it was just pure hopelessness. And it also just didn't make sense. Like, I always would think about it like we are meant to survive. So why would our bodies attack itself? Like, it's a concept that bothered me even as a little kid. Like, it's the opposite of what our body is supposed to do. As I've grown up, I've learned that, when your body is in the right environment and gets the right nutrition, you have a much better chance of survive, not just surviving, but really thriving. And that's been something. Well, Sam and I both ended up keto, so we'll get there later in the conversation, I guess.
It's such a silent epidemic though, right? The autoimmune disease epidemic, it's just skyrocketed over, the past 5 or 6 decades.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's broken up into such small segments. You have, inflammatory bowel disease, MS, type 1, Hashimoto's. You have all these different um, autoimmune issues. And
Yeah.
I don't feel like there's an organization really, looking at it as a whole. It's truly a silent epidemic. If you lump it all together, I mean, it's got to be hundreds of millions of lives.
I think so.
Eczema, I'm just thinking out loud, eczema, psoriasis. I mean, there's so many, psoriatic arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis.
Everything, yeah.
This idea, it also doesn't sit well with me. The idea of the body wanting to attack itself. It doesn't quite make sense.
Doesn't. And yeah, and my whole family is there's autoimmune disease everywhere. Like my husband has type 1 diabetes. My mother-in-law has rheumatoid arthritis. My mom had MS. There's just it is an epidemic. And I think there's a lot we can do about it that we aren't doing. That's one of my things I'm passionate about.
I think
So,
it's certainly the next frontier, and there's definitely various companies that are interested in looking into that. But you eventually, I mean, you went through your childhood, you have affinity to animals, you're eating sort of low fat, and then at some you get this, trigger, this viral trigger, I guess,
mhm.
and boom, your health starts to deteriorate. So what happens next?
What happens next? So what happens next is that I got pregnant, and for the first time I had an oral glucose tolerance test, and I found out that I had gestational diabetes. And my doctor was like, this doesn't make sense. Maybe we should retest. You're young, you're in your 20s, you're thin, like you shouldn't have gestational diabetes. Um, I didn't know anything about it. I, there was hardly anything on the internet at the time. And so nobody told me to use a glucose meter. This was before my husband was diagnosed with type 1. My only instructions were don't eat cookies and cake, like just don't have dessert. And I was like, okay, no problem. I don't really eat that much of that stuff anyway. And I continued to drink orange juice, which I thought was healthy. I ate grapes. I thought they were good for me. I had absolutely no idea. And I had a very difficult pregnancy, and without ever knowing what was causing the problems. And so in my second pregnancy, right away, the doctor said, you're going to need insulin. And in between the pregnancies, my blood sugar was not really concerning to my doctors. I'd have slightly elevated fasting glucose, and it was always said, well, you had a grandfather with type 2 diabetes, so it's genetic. You'll have to worry about it when you're older. Okay, like I didn't know. I worried about it because I was generally anxious, like about health especially. So so in my second pregnancy, I took insulin, and then I was okay afterwards. And in my third pregnancy, by that time, I knew a lot about type 1 diabetes. My husband had been diagnosed, and I just had a feeling that I had to have type 1 because it didn't make sense. Like it
So
was just,
he developed type 1,
yeah,
and you guys
yeah, yeah.
figured that out, and then you're like,
Well, with his presentation was nothing like mine. He got really sick quite fast, lost huge amounts of weight, and had pretty much all the classic symptoms, the blurry vision, couldn't feel his feet. He was misdiagnosed a couple times, and sent home. And he really almost died. Like when he was diagnosed, his A1C was over 15. His blood sugar was, like 1,000. His fasting blood sugars
wow.
would be 400 or 500. Like it was, and the numbers were scary. So, so we started to learn very quickly. And one of the first things we learned was that it's really impossible to eat carbohydrates and take insulin and balance it out. Like you're constantly high or low. And so from the first day of his diagnosis, my husband said, okay, I'm never eating sugar again. Like I'm just not going to touch it, which is great, except we still didn't understand that all carbohydrates are sugar. Um, it was a really long process. Nobody in those days talked about low carb or keto or anything. It was just, carbs are
The
carbs are
diabetes
good for you.
diet, 50 grams per
Yeah,
meal, right? And
yeah,
just
yeah,
dose
yeah,
insulin before and after. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So we life was really hard, and we had little kids, and Mike was on the like total blood sugar roller coaster all the time. And anyone who knows what it's like to be the partner of someone with type 1, you make runs for the sugar, you like it's really scary when you see someone suffering from hypoglycemia. And having experienced it myself, I can say that it is terrifying. I remember having a really bad hypoglycemic episode when I was pregnant with my third son, and I thought I was going to fall over, and I thought I was going to lose the baby, and I think it was after that pregnancy that I just I realized, like, I don't want to have this. I knew I had type 1 at that point. I'd been diagnosed in my third pregnancy based on autoantibodies and low C-peptide, which suggested that I wasn't producing enough insulin. So I kind of said, like, I'm going to figure out if I can do this without the insulin. Like, once my son was born, I felt like, okay, my body's mine again. I can take some risks. And I knew that my type 1 had not presented in the same way that my husband's did. I didn't have blood sugars that were so out of range. They were slightly out of range. And so I just took my glucose meter, and I constantly checked my blood sugar before and after meals. And I do real experiments, like, let's see what happens if I eat 20 grams of carbs. Let's see what happens if it's an apple versus, a grain. And I just figured out what I could metabolize without needing to inject insulin. And that's what I ate. And it turned out that I was eating a lot of cheese. I mean, that was the easiest thing for me, because I didn't want to eat meat. So there was a lot of cheese and eggs and vegetables, and that was most of my diet. And I was never upset about it. I've just always been so grateful. Like, there's food I can eat, and I don't need to take medication to eat it. So I felt so lucky. And people always say, well, aren't you deprived? Don't you miss things? And, like, not at all. And anyway, if I miss something, then okay, then I have it once, like, I used to really love pizza. I kind of got over it, but sure, plenty of times I'd have some pizza. I'm not perfect, but I never ate a lot of it. And I just kind of lived a normal life, but without the carbs for the last 15 years. And truly, I couldn't be happier that I have this situation, because the alternative is, to me, pretty bad. Like, I don't want to live on insulin. And I think, I mean, we can talk more about root causes, but I do think that my diet contributed to the development of diabetes. And I do think that by sticking to a low carb keto diet, that that I'm preventing other illnesses from developing. So
it's interesting. It's so interesting that some of the things you said, I want to touch on it. The type 1 population is also like this unheard of, unseen population. They live in constant fear of death from hypoglycemia. They live 15 years, lower than the average person. The management takes such a psychological toll. Dosing insulin, checking blood sugars. Pretty soon in the JMH, we'll have a type 1 position statement from the SMHP which I'm really looking forward to. I know that'll be something that, because every type 1 patient deserves a normal A1C,
Yes.
and they don't deserve to be told the way you have to do it is eat carbohydrates and dose insulin. And I feel so strongly that every person should be offered a low carb option, less drug, low carb option,
Yes.
as a way to manage their disease. And you brought up another interesting point, which is, what if this diet has implications on autoimmune disease development? And if you asked me 10 years ago, I would have said, Jess, this is crazy talk. I would have said, this is insane. I'm a board certified doctor. This is crazy talk, right? Food can't do that. And yet, in this year, we have a study on Hashimoto's showing that a low carb diet reduces autoantibodies, and MRI confirmed inflammation of the thyroid gland with a ketogenic diet. So help me understand, should I start drinking the Kool-Aid more?
Yes, because I mean, like totally not an expert in any of this. I am someone
Well, the low carb
who
Kool-Aid.
yeah,
So
I,
it's like
I,
let's qualify
I,
the Kool-Aid comment with a low carb Kool-Aid,
I mean, look, our bodies require zero carbohydrates. Like that's the crazy thing with how we treat diabetes, right? Because I mean, when I was diagnosed, what everyone was saying was you need carbs for energy. Your brain needs carbs. You won't function without it. And you're like, well, I'm gonna try. And today, we know that that the ketogenic diet is amazing for the brain. And I think it's the same for our immune system. Our bodies need fat. They don't need carbs. They need real fat, and um, not the canola oil, not the seed oils, not the industrial stuff. They need real fat. I think animal fat is the way to go. It certainly has been for me. I know that's hard for people who are vegetarian. It definitely something that was hard for me. We can get to that part of my journey, but I do
Yeah,
think that
let's get to it. Yeah.
yeah.
I can't imagine, like, you were vegetarian, you hadn't eaten meat in a long time. I mean, I can't imagine that you flipped the switch and just had steaks and you know
Not quite.
yeah.
So and my husband gets a lot of credit for helping me out with this, and also for inspiring me, because he has type 1, and he had a lot of symptoms of other autoimmune issues. And his mom has rheumatoid arthritis, and we were pretty sure he was developing it. And we followed the carnivore movement, and it's probably like I don't know, maybe like 2017 or something. I wrote an article about it, and we published it on A Sweet Life. And my husband always liked to eat meat, and we'd kind of joke around like, oh, you could be one of those people who eats only meat. And well, he got sick enough that he said, I'm gonna try it. And he started to heal. It was, you could call it was like miraculous, but it's actually just a science. Like his body started getting what it needed without things that were making him sick or interfering with the absorption of what he needed. And he began to heal, and he got healthier than he'd been since his type 1 diagnosis. And he'd been low carb, for many, many years before he went carnivore. His recovery was so spectacular that I said, we have to try this with our son, who'd had a lot of chronic health problems from the time he was a baby. And at that point I was like, I can't go do this with my son without trying it myself. Like, I can't preach, you've got to eat meat all day long if I'm not going to do it. So I figured out how to do it. That the good part of the story is that my son had an incredible response to it too. He's not like strict carnivore, but his diet's animal based, and he is healed so much. And so that's been wonderful. And then for me, what I was really interested in as somebody who, citizen scientists reading about dietary fats a lot, was what would be the effect of animal fat on my brain. And that was because I had been following the work of Dr. Chris Palmer, the psychiatrist, who is the author of Brain Energy. And the brain energy theory basically says that all mental disorders share a root cause of metabolic dysfunction. And I knew that the keto diet had been successful in treating mental disorders. And I knew, the keto diet had been successful in treating epilepsy for a very long time. But that's something that just isn't talked about in conventional medicine. Like, it's always considered the last thing you should try if someone has epilepsy. If everything else fails, try the diet. But another way to look at it would be, try the diet first. Maybe you won't need all those drugs. So I decided to start my experiment into eating meat by using beef tallow. And because it looks like coconut oil, and I couldn't bring myself to actually eat the meat. And I also kind of thought, well, we'll be a little scientific about it, because if I'm only eating the fat, then I'll know that it's the fat if making me feel better and not the actual meat. So, kind of preparing myself, saying, all right, are you going to placebo yourself into this? Like, it's going to work because you're determined for it to work. So I tried it, and I didn't give any background that I did have really bad anxiety. I functioned fine with it. I was able to do everything that I needed to do, but I just carried it with me. There was another person inside of me, the anxious one, that I just had to listen to all the time. But I've referred to it as like a heavy backpack that you never put down. Like, you're going through your life and doing everything, but you just can't get rid of it. And then a couple weeks into eating beef tallow, which I was just basically coating veggies in it and baking them and eating a lot of it. And suddenly, a couple weeks into this dietary change, I said to Mariella, who you talked to her just yesterday, right? And she's an endocrinologist and keto. And I called her up and I said, I think I know what happy feels like. Like, this something happened to my brain, and that it's not that the anxiety like totally went away, but it just quieted down. And I felt like like I finally understood how people, I'd always kind of wondered, like, how do people get through life without all this stress? Like, somehow people function, and they're not all so anxious all the time. And then I kind of got a glimpse into what that is. And now, sadly, I feel like people, maybe way more people, are anxious than I ever imagined. And it's something, as I've become more involved in the world of, mental health advocacy, I feel like it's really, there's so much anxiety, and so much we could do about it with metabolic strategies. So that's one of my other passions.
And we now have the data to support. We have case series, we have some interesting retrospective studies and ongoing interventional trials for ketogenic diets in mental health. We have
Yeah.
positive data in depression. We have positive data for anxiety. We know diet trials that focus on real food can alleviate depression as much as an SSRI. We know that similarly, diet and exercise each can impact anxiety in the very same way.
Yep.
So it's unfortunate. The problem, I think, with focusing on metabolic strategies is it's very easy to market a pill solution. And it's not very easy to market a real food solution. And I think that's been one of the biggest barriers, because if you could make diet into a pill, it would be a blockbuster.
Yeah.
You
But I mean, I think part of what I'm doing now with trying to organize the metabolic revolution is that I'm not against people taking medication if it makes them feel better, and I'm not against people eating junk food if that's what they choose to do. I don't think it's a wise choice, but I respect people's choices. And I absolutely, if somebody wants to go take medication, have procedures, whatever you want to do, fine. But I think that at the same time, we have a right to know about these metabolic strategies and therapies, and they should not be kept from people. We should be funding studies with metabolic strategies. Doctors should be listening to people like me and many, many others like me who are doing the same things. And it shouldn't be looked at, what you said you would have thought 10 years ago, she's a crazy person. I mean, I've gotten that a million times. I don't really care. I don't have a medical license to lose or anything. So I really believe that people should have the knowledge to use metabolic therapies, and the doctors should support them. That people shouldn't have to be in a situation where I was in, where I was really scared all the time. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, and constantly having to ask, basically, is my common sense crazy? Like, it doesn't make sense to me that I should eat carbohydrates if they make my blood sugar go up, but the doctors say I should, so it's scary. And if we had a situation where doctors said, okay, you want to try the diet, these are the important things that you should know. We'll monitor your blood and your blood work, and we'll help you do this safely. Like, that's the ask. The ask is not to undo everything that already exists.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, I was so excited when I first sort of learned about you, and I'm ashamed to say, I didn't get a chance to look at your talk, but we'll put in the show notes from Dave
Great.
Feldman's conference. But we all, like, there's all these facets of the movement. There's the carnivore group, there's the keto group, there's the food addiction people, there's the metabolic people, there's the type 1 group. And so I was so happy to see, I'm like, somebody is putting together a rally in Washington, D.C. And immediately I'm like, who's doing this? This is the greatest idea I've ever heard. Getting people together for free, no admission, no nothing, just come and show that you care about this. And at the same time, both sides of the political aisle are starting to talk about metabolic health. You have R.F. Kennedy in the United States here, writing an op-ed in the in the Wall Street Journal saying it's time to make America healthy. So when I saw this, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. How can I help? How can I be a part of it? So help the listener understand, because, there's a pretty clear mission here, right? And, this is a sort of inaugural start. So
Yes.
can you tell people a little bit about what is behind the Metabolic Revolution and what are you looking to accomplish?
Okay. First, I'll tell you that first, thank you for saying all the nice things you said about it. And I couldn't be happier that you support it and that you like the idea. It's
And what
just
I love
about
is it's
as
bipartisan. That's what I love. It's
nonpartisan.
bipartisan, meaning like it is the health of the world,
The world. Yeah, yeah. It's
but
a,
what excites me is that it is something that is on the radar of everybody now.
I
The
hope
cost of
so.
diabetes, it is being talked about in, the Wall Street Journal. It's being talked about on the news. And I think it's the right place at the right time.
I hope so. I mean, first of all, it is as grassroots as could be. And I've been talking to a lot of people in our space for a very long time. And I volunteered with the group with Dr. Chris Palmer for a long time, trying to get a grassroots thing going, and everything kind of fizzled out. And finally, I was a few months ago, maybe like 4 or 5 months ago, I found out that there is going to be a big integrative mental health conference in Washington, D.C. And Dr. Georgia Eid, who is an amazing psychiatrist, metabolic psychiatrist, so she's going to be there, and Dr. Chris Palmer is going to be there, and Dr. Robert Lustig is going to be there, and so many big names in this world. And I've been wanting to go to Washington, D.C. I don't have any funding to bring people there, but if they're already going to be there, and there's already going to be some hundreds of people at this conference who are interested in the same thing that I'm interested in, I was like, let's just go. And of course, it became a little more complicated than that, because I didn't have a legal entity for the Metabolic Revolution. But the volunteers have stepped up. It's been incredible. There is a volunteer named Matthew Henry who has just been like, yes, I support you. I want to help you do this. I met him a couple of years ago. I didn't really know him. I was on a call for volunteers in Dr. Chris Palmer's brain energy movement. And this man, Matthew Henry, who's a cancer survivor, was sitting there on the call, and next to me had a framed picture of mitochondria. And it was so moving to me. Like he got it. He understood that this is about our mitochondria. And so when I wanted to start doing something, I reached out to him, and I knew he was in DC, and he's just been an incredible help. And then there's so many other volunteers who've just stepped up. Julie King and Eric Rogers, Brett Smith. These people have just devoted to the cause, and every day since we announced the Metabolic Revolution rally, I've been getting emails from people who want to help. I would say out of the people who've signed up, about 50% have said they want to be involved and volunteer. Like, people have this passion that they don't want this to not be known. Like, this kind of healing that we're doing, maybe it's not for everyone, but a lot of people would choose this if they weren't afraid, if they weren't discouraged from it, if they weren't terrified about LDL. That's where, Dave Feldman's work is coming into play so nicely, that showing us that we don't have to be terrified of LDL elevations. So my husband's a lean mass hyperresponder. I am too, though not as severely. So the revolution it's just coming. Like, I can't even really tell you exactly everything because it's happening so fast. New people step in every day and want to help. We're scrambling. I'm doing a million things at a time, and I am really excited to be able to allocate more tasks to volunteers and build a movement, to hopefully something that will be sustainable and effective. And the things that we're really calling for, there's two main things. And one is that we absolutely cannot keep going with the current dietary guidelines. Every 5 years, the guidelines get updated. And so 2025 is when the new guidelines are going to be released. And the guidelines still recommend 50% carbs, more than 50%. And so we're basically telling people to eat sugar. And we know, you don't have to read anything or understand anything to see the obesity epidemic. You just look around, and it's been getting increasingly worse since the guidelines came around. And so, we really can't continue any longer to live under the guidelines that are making us sick, and they're not science-based. So
I think the huge thing here is it is a very clear mission, right? There is a root cause. We are all sick. 93% of America is sick. We all need to get healthy, and it has to be demanded by the people. We can no longer expect politicians to do it. We can no longer expect the insurance companies to do it. The doctors don't want to do it, right? And this idea to get people together for free, just come, show your support, hear from some awesome speakers, and hit the issue head on, which is our food and our carbohydrates and our sugar consumption and our, fake oils are not working. They're not working for people on a systemic scale. And you can donate to this cause. You can join a rally. You can listen to some speakers, maybe even join this conference you're talking about, which I don't know much about.
Yes. It's called IMMH, and it's October 10th to 13th in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and if I remember, the rally is on the 13th.
The 13th, yes.
So this is huge, and it's in DC. It's free. You can just show up if you're in the area. If you're in New York, take a bus down. If you're in Philly, take a train down. If you're in Virginia, the Carolinas, come and show your support. And I think this is just to show also, in my mind, this is to show people in DC, like, we care about health,
Exactly.
And we all know everybody cares about health. We all care about it. You know, RFK wrote an amazing piece, and I'm not being political, but I'm just saying politicians are waking up that they have to start caring. They have to start caring about metabolic health. They have to start caring about what we're doing. And I hope you get, thousands of people here. And I hope I'll be joining too. I can't announce that quite yet, but I'll certainly be promoting it. But I'm going to do my best.
So.
Yeah, I'll do my best to be there, and
I
I'll
hope
be
you
in
can
contact
come.
with you. Yeah, I would love to be there. And I just look at the speakers you already have: Ken Berry, Maria Glant, who I just interviewed yesterday, Tony Hampton, Mark Cucuzella, Vinny Tortorich. I mean, these are all warriors. So
and we're
I
there
can't.
because we want to tell whoever the next president is that you cannot ignore metabolic health. I think it needs to be acknowledged. The crisis needs to be addressed. Everybody is in such poor mental health. People's anxiety is through the roof. And we know that there's a root cause. So we have to start talking about it, and we have to start dealing with it. And the solution cannot just be to pile on drugs that mask symptoms.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. We've been preaching this for the past almost 8 years. Jess, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Guys, if you're out there and you're listening to this, or you're seeing it on YouTube, you're listening to it on Spotify, go to Metabolic Revolution. Remind me the website again, Jess? .org, right? Metabolicrevolution.org. Sign up as a volunteer. I will be sending out some details about it in our newsletter, so you guys can all check that out. But hopefully I'll be able to be there. Let's see if I can drag Rosette and the kids. And I'll be coming with a big sign of my before and after. That'll be my sign.
We want people to come with their before and afters. We're going to have music there, and we're going to celebrate people who have healed, and we're going to give people hope.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for organizing this.
Thank
you for everything you've done in this field and everything you are doing. You are a warrior. Gosh, not only are you your own personal warrior, your own journey, you've been doing this for how long? You've been involved in all these organizations, but also the sister of Sam and a best friend to Mariella. You guys are a powerhouse.
Yeah, we're working hard. Thank you. We
want
to.
Awesome. Love it.
Thank you so much for hosting me.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Bye.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us on Patreon by going to lowcarbmd.com.